everyone.
Hey everyone.
Welcome to episode, what is this, 3? I think this is 3. Yeah. Welcome to episode 3 of the workshop discussion series. It's been a while, but we're super excited to be back. Our topic for today is going to center around salary negotiation. We're going to talk a bit about our personal experiences and how we've negotiated our salaries from earlier on, like when we first started our careers, till date. We're also going to share a few tips and tricks around salary negotiation. And then lastly, we're going to bust a few myths that are consistently, discussed around salary negotiation. So yeah, we're just excited to get started. And I didn't even say who I am. For those who are just joining, I'm Tamilola Bassi, and this is my husband.
I'm Sam Bassi.
Yeah, and we're just super excited to get into this. We're currently tech professionals looking to support other people along their career journeys. So super excited. Let us know if you want any other topic discussions, but we're gonna jump right in, and I'll let Sam start by sharing his personal experiences and journey around salary negotiation.
Yeah, so hey everyone, nice to see you all again. So I first wanted to start by talking about my first job. So the first job I ever had back in 2014, with a consulting firm, a Big Four consulting firm. And I remember, being, 23, 22, and not really knowing negotiation anything, right? So this was kind of like my first intro into anything negotiation. So I vividly remember that process. I pretty much threw out a number and they came back and said, sure, why not? Let's sign. So for me, that was an experience that, at the time it seemed like, I'm in a good position, like things are going well. But as I started to, talk to more people and understand, what a person at this particular role was making, I realized I was somewhat on the lower end of the entire scale. So for me back then, again, first job and everything, I was kind of wide-eyed, very green, and said, okay, this is money. It's more than I've ever made in my life. So I'm going to go ahead and say yes to it.
And sorry, I would just say that this is something that I think is very prevalent in the African American community. Correct me if I'm wrong.
Yeah, that's true.
But that's something that I've been hearing a lot of, is that first glimpse into oh my God, corporate America, oh my God, they're offering me X amount, and not really knowing, if that is truly worth the role, I guess. I don't know how to phrase it, but just a note, right, is that this is something that I have noticed is kind of prevalent in the African American community.
Yeah, for sure. And again, something that I kind of took from in my experience to say, I will never make this mistake again. I will make sure to negotiate, to kind of fight for what I feel my value was. But again, back then, I didn't really know what my value was. I felt like, there was really no way to gauge it. So I kind of went with the flow. But what changed for me, going from my first consulting firm to the second consulting firm, was that knowledge of, okay, I know what not to do now, and I know to make sure that I'm going to speak up, right? Even if, they offer me something that, is reasonable, me personally, I'm always going to push to the edge, and I'm always going to say, okay, I want X, and shoot for the moon and then land on the stars. So that's kind of the approach I took when it came to my second company. So from the beginning, even before I got an offer, when I was still going through interviews, I said, this is the number I'm looking at. I'm interviewing with other firms, letting them know that, hey, I'm scoping out other places. So you got to come correct in terms of compensation.
Correct.
Yeah. So for me, that was something that I kind of pushed forward. So the initial salary they offered me was great. It was, a sizable jump from where I was at my previous company. But again, I like to shoot for the stars. So I asked for a little bit more than what they were giving me. And this was kind of my first experience into negotiation and being told, we may not be able to do that. So from there, I kind of got shook a little bit and said, okay, maybe I shouldn't have asked for all that. I should have just been happy for what they gave me.
Myth.
Yeah, exactly. Myth. So what ended up happening is they ended up matching that and said, oh yeah, sure, we could do this. After, the little negotiation period of, we'll see what we can do. Let's check out the numbers. but they ended up coming back and saying, yes, well, we want you to, be a part of the team. So yeah, here you go. So again, that gave me confidence in saying that, okay, just because I negotiate, and this is another myth, just because I negotiate doesn't mean that they're going to pull the offer from me and say, you know what, you're getting too greedy. So that's never going to happen. Or if it does, it's very rare. So
and it's a red flag.
Yeah, exactly. If they're doing that, then you might want to check that company. But I think for me that kind of gave me the confidence to where I just started a new job in December, where I threw out all the guns. I knew that if a company exactly, if a company wants you and they offer you something, they will do whatever it takes to get you to sign with them. So for me, again,
within reason though.
Yeah, within reason, right? It has to be reasonable, but again, my philosophy is I want to shoot high, and then let them come back and tell me, okay, this is outside of the band, this is outside of the range that, for your particular level. So for me, again, I negotiated for the job I'm in now, I negotiated a sign-on bonus when that really wasn't even a part of the initial package, because for me, they didn't reach exactly where I wanted to in terms of salary, but what they did is, include the sign-on and include more equity for the firm or for the company I'm at now. So there's different chips that you have in terms of bargaining that they will be able to. Most companies are going to be flexible, right? If you're not getting the salary that you want, they'll push you more equity, they'll push you more sign-on, they'll push you something. So always remember you have different kind of weapons in your arsenal, whatever, like different types of things that you can do in order to kind of end up where you want. So that has been my experience, and
nice. Thank you for sharing. No problem. Now my experience, I don't know if it's been so glamorous, honestly, but I'll also start from the beginning. So, initially, same situation. I started off at a Big Four consulting firm, and prior to that, I was working in nonprofit, where I'm sure a lot of people know in nonprofit, the salaries are a bit different from, Big Four life in terms of just the scale and just the gap, right? In terms of how much more you could make in the consulting world. And going back to myth busting. So something that I thought when I was interviewing and when I had applied is that I couldn't ask for a certain amount higher than what I was making already, which that is a complete myth, right? Because one, they're completely different industries, meaning their salary scales are totally different, right? So you can't assume that because I was at this nonprofit and making X amount, I need to only ask for 15% more or 10% more when I'm interviewing at another company in a different industry, right? But at that time, I didn't know. I thought that was the standard. Okay, this is what I'm making. I'm gonna ask for 20% more. And the funny thing is, when I did that, the recruiter themselves told me whoa, we don't even start that low. You remember that? Yeah, and I was just oh, okay, well, what do you think makes sense? Big mistake. So I asked what do you think, where do you think I should fall? And they came back to me with a number that at that time for me, again, was pretty exciting. I think, like I said earlier, a lot of African Americans find ourselves in this situation where you get your first real corporate offer and you're just so excited by seeing money right on the table that you're not necessarily thinking ahead. So at that point in time, I was super excited, signed the offer, and it was interesting because I told you this, that I think on my first day, some people were whispering and talking about what they make and what they got hired in with. And I literally was sick to my stomach because the gap was insane. Can't even explain how bad the gap was, but it was really, really bad. And honestly, I think that contributes a little bit to your experience at work, right? Because if you feel like I'm busting my ass, right? I'm doing all this work, but I'm making less than this person who is same level, same role, but for some reason they're making more, and probably because they knew how to negotiate or knew that they needed to negotiate. So this was kind of a situation where I felt like I shot myself in the foot, right? So from there, I ended up moving to another company where I did finally negotiate salary. And it was great. I felt empowered to do so only because, to Sam's point earlier, right? You can't assume that negotiation means they're gonna pull the offer. Like, that's just not going to happen. Honestly, if they want you, they also want to hear you out and make sure that you're happy. So in that next role, I negotiated a higher salary than where I was at. It was with a government agency, so there weren't necessarily things like sign-on bonuses and equity and things like that that I could negotiate, but I focused on salary, and I ended up staying there only for a little bit of time and going back to my first company. But my next round of negotiations was for a role that I came to LA for, what was it?
Yeah.
March of last year. Yeah. So for that one as well, again, when in negotiating, also I felt more confident because I had a few other offers, right? So that also helps boost your confidence if you're interviewing with more places, like what Sam said earlier, like letting the companies know, like, hey, you know, I'm also playing the field a little bit, right? And like, this is what I'm hearing. Using that also as a bargaining chip, even though you don't need that to bargain, right? You can look at the market assessment. You can talk to different people who are in those roles that are close to you, people that you trust that are willing to share what they make. And that will also help you in your negotiation. So for that role, I was able to negotiate like salary, sign-on, and relocation, which was great. Honestly, I was like, oh my God, I've never done anything like this before. So at that point, that's when I was like, boom, like nobody can tell me anything. I'm going after it, because a lot of people always say, are you sure you could do that? Like, do you want to ask for that much more than what you make? But yes, I do. I do, especially if I've done my research and I know it's possible, then I'm going to ask for it. And in my current role now, again, had to go through negotiations, and same thing, I was able to negotiate like a sign-on, you know, with equity. And I actually got very, very, very close to the salary that I wanted. And it did take some back and forth. So that's actually one myth that I wanted to talk about. And I'll link this article in the comments, but this was through Harvard Business Review. And they were basically busting different myths around salary negotiation. One of which is around, you know, it said something like, the myth is when I negotiate and my manager or the manager or whoever says yes, I should immediately celebrate, right? And the reason why this myth was busted is because if they can say yes that quickly, it means they can give you more, right? So like,
that's true. Yeah.
In Sam's situation, like he said, for this current role, there was some back and forth until they reached the number that he wanted.
Three rounds.
Yeah, three rounds of back and forth. It wasn't just like, I want this, and they were like, okay, no problem. If it happens that quickly, then it's like, there's clearly more money on the table.
Yeah.
Period. So in both of our instances, there was a lot of back and forth to finally get to that point. And again, to what Sam said earlier, a lot of people during that time start to get nervous and feel like, oh my God, they're gonna think that I'm unreasonable, or they're gonna, just so many negative things that you think they're thinking about you when really they're in the background trying to figure out how to get you on, right? So there's no negative thoughts happening. And that's another myth that we're busting today, because a lot of people end up, you know, following up. Let's say it's been like 3 days that have passed. You could be like, hey, actually, I'm good with the initial number. I've had some time to think about it, because you're so nervous that they're saying bad things, when that's you ridding yourself of your blessing, right? Because really, they could have been emailing you that night to say like, hey, you know what? We figured it out. We pulled the money from here and there. We're going to do X, Y, Z. But you beat them to the punch by getting nervous, right? And backing down. So don't back down. As long as you're asking for things within reason, right? You've done your research, you know what the role is worth and what you're worth, your value is to the team, then go for it.
Yeah. And one of the things that you kept mentioning, which I think is important for people to know, I mean, count the many times that she said research, right? It's so important to know your market value. And again, it's easier nowadays than it was before, I think, because of all these different tools like Glassdoor and Blind and what's the consulting, Fishbowl, like things like that, where you have peers that are giving you data points and saying, okay, this is what I make, this is my years of experience, this is this and that. So for me personally, when I was looking, doing salary negotiations for my current role, I use all of that stuff. Like I use every single one. Exactly. I use so many things in order for me to say, okay, if they offer me this, that means they're lowballing me. If they're offering me this, that means, okay, we're in a good spot. And then if they offer me this other side, then where do I sign?
Good.
Yeah. So for me, it's using those resources, knowing your market value. There's one thing on Glassdoor that I don't use as much, but I used to use. I think it's called Know Your Worth or Know Your Value. It's like a particular tool where you can enter your user experience, what you do, and it'll like pop out a number. Again, it's probably fairly accurate, but it'll give you like the number, and it'll say you are in the top 10% in your whatever in your region or this and that. So again, that's something that you can use. Blind and all that stuff is really good. But yeah, so I think knowing what your role is and like knowing your worth essentially is like super important to be able to negotiate, because in both of our stories, the first job we didn't know anything. We made so many assumptions where we could have easily talked to somebody and said, "Oh no, this is not how it works." So again, it's a learning experience.
Wait, did I say something? Yeah. Let me tell you what makes this funnier is that Sam was already at Deloitte. Oh, it's fine. Sam was already at the first consulting company for, was it a year?
Before you came on?
Yeah, for a year. A whole year before I came on, before I was negotiating and had all those salary insights. But again, it goes back to, I think it's also about professional maturity, right? Like at that point, still very early in his career, probably wasn't having those conversations around like, what am I making? What are you making? Yeah. So when I asked for like Sam's advice, like, what do you think I should ask for? And to him, I was like, yeah, that sounds about right. You know what I mean? And again, it wasn't anything malicious, but it was just like, not knowing what other people are making, you assume that, oh yeah, this is right on par, or like you're good. But when I joined, I'm telling you, I was like, wow, I'm lower, right? So of course there are things that you could do while you're in that job that's for another day, but like how to kind of increase your salary within the current company, because it's not always about jumping around. You can still do it within there, and there are different ways to negotiate internally. But yeah, that's kind of just where I found myself, and just had to keep negotiating my way up till I got to where I wanted to be.
Yeah. So I know you want to go into the myths. So real quick, I'm just gonna give you like a few tips that have helped me. And again, you can infer from like both of our experiences and the stories that like you can see these things in it. But the first thing, and I was actually telling a good friend of mine that recently got hired by a company. But in your salary negotiations, be firm. Like, again, firm. There's very little or no companies that are going to say no to you. Yeah. Like if you come back, if they give you an offer and they come back to you and say, what do you think? Right? It's okay for you to say, this is my worth and this is way under what I'm expecting. Yeah. Can we have conversations about how we can get it closer to my salary, or are there any other levers or stuff that you can pull in order to get close to what you want, right? So again, if they say, like you're asking for too much, it's not like, oh, okay, whatever, I'm gonna go back to the original offer and we good. I don't want you to back out your offer. It's no, okay, I understand where you're coming from. How can we get closer to a number that makes me feel more comfortable? Because a lot of times, especially for me, I was at a good company before I got to another good company. So for me, I was like, if you're not offering me anything better than my old company, there's no incentive for me to leave, right? Yeah. So for them, they're like, okay, we know that this guy, it's cool staying where he is, but once once that happens, it's like, okay, we really want him on our team. Let's see which way. So again, a company will go to bat for you and, pull some strings for you, so to say, like, if they want you. And again, if you get an offer, that means they want you.
Yeah. No, and I was just gonna say, like, even if you're not, like, deep down that you don't want to stay where you are, don't put those chips on the table. Like, this is a game. Yeah. Don't like poker face all day. I love my current role. I love what I'm doing. Like, that's the kind of energy you need to be putting out there, so it doesn't look like you're desperate, right? Because when it looks like you have no other options, right, and you don't like what you're doing now, you don't like maybe the company you're working for at that time, there's no incentive for them to feel like they need to woo you, right? It's kind of like, they're not happy where they are, so let's just throw a number out there and we're sure they'll take it. And then also, don't be afraid to turn an offer down. Like, I know a lot of people, you go through the negotiations, and if they say no, like no budging, no wiggle room, and you feel like that is severely below, you know, what people in that role are making or what people are paying in that role, like don't be afraid to say no. There is literally other opportunities will come, right? Like I am a strong believer in advocating for yourself, and that's one way to do so. So yeah, don't be afraid to say no. Like more options will come your way.
Exactly. And then the last thing I'll say before we go to the myths is salary is not the end all be all, even though a lot of us think that way. There are so many things that you get from your company, your organization that is not necessarily monetary or whatever, right?
Depending on industry.
Depending on industry, that's a good point. But I would also suggest, you know, that you also look into the perks and the benefits that you get in addition to the salary, right? I can take a job, let's throw out a number, for $200,000 that I literally don't get to spend time with my wife or get to do anything outside of...
Unacceptable.
Exactly. Get to do anything outside of work or, you know, anything like that. Yes, I'm making good money, but I have no work-life balance. I don't have, you know, the freedom to be able to, you know, split personal and work. So again, not saying that you shouldn't take a $200,000 job. That is not what I'm saying. But I'm just saying...
Not at the cost of your life.
Exactly. Work-life balance and these types of things are super important to be able to say, yes, I enjoy my job, but I can also live my life outside of my job, right? Perks like, I don't know, PTO or stuff like that, where they're giving you X amount of PTO. Like things like that should also sway your decision.
Maternity leave.
Yeah, maternity leave, right? Basing your life and saying, okay, this is what I want to do in the next couple of years or whatever, and seeing how that company fits you, I think is also important. But again, salary is a huge part of it, but don't let that be the end all be all, again, because you can find yourself in situations where you're not as happy making, you know, whatever amount of money than you would have been taking maybe a little bit less money that has a lot more flexibility for your job. So yeah.
Awesome. Okay, so let's get into these myths. And like I said, I'm gonna link the article link because this is not my knowledge, or what did they call it, intellectual property.
Yeah.
This is a Harvard Business Review article that I really liked. I think all of these myths are accurate. I only pulled out, I think 5. You saw me like keep getting up, my computer screen kept locking, but I'm just gonna go down the list. So starting with one of the first myths that I pulled out of the article that I really like is, this is my first job. I don't have experience, so I don't have any bargaining power. False.
It's an X.
It's an X. That's a big myth. Again, this is kind of similar to thinking you need to ask for a salary close to what you're making now. Like, just take yourself out of the equation because they called you. At the end of the day, they called you, so you're qualified. So think from the perspective of a qualified individual. Do your research and find out, you know, what are they actually paying people for these roles? And then use that as your bargaining power, right? So don't say you don't have any, because if you didn't, you wouldn't even be interviewing. Like, let's just be real.
Yeah.
Anything to add?
One other thing I'll add here, if you know somebody that's at the company, and again, somebody, you mentioned it before, but like somebody that you trust, that you can say, okay, I'm coming into the same role, even if they don't give you the exact number, what range or whatever did you get, and what's your level? Kind of doing like comparing and contrasting, and like being able to know if you're getting lowballed or not. So like, you can use other people too. I've heard of people that, this is a little bit more risky, but like you can reach out to people on LinkedIn that you know, or you maybe
really risky.
Yeah. So I mean, I've heard of people doing that though, and saying like, you're in the role that I want. Can you tell me like salary range wise? Ballpark. It doesn't have to be exact again, but they can kind of give you an idea, and it's just crowdsourcing, right? Being able to.
Okay, crowdsourcing.
Yeah, I'm about to say getting people to get you data points for yourself to be able to say, okay, I don't want this job, or I want this job, and I want to ask for more money. So.
Yeah, well, he just messed up one of my other myths. I didn't put it on this list, but
which one?
It's literally aligns with what you just said. So one of the myths, I'm paraphrasing because I don't have it right in front of me, but it talked about using the internet as a sole source of basically like research for salary is okay.
Oh,
and
yeah.
Myth busted, of course. To Sam's point, like, you get more valid information through crowdsourcing. by reaching out to your networks, to your friends, to your peers, whoever, to figure out like, what are you ballpark? What are you actually making? What are the perks? Like, I don't think you can necessarily go as much as what was your bonus and what is your equity. Like, that's a bit much. But if you're talking about compensation package in terms of salary, again, asking for ranges and not for the specific number, that's totally acceptable. Yeah. So that's another myth. Number 2 on my list is I don't have another offer, so I can't negotiate. I think I talked about this earlier too. Yeah. But yeah, that's false. Like, you don't always have to have another offer to negotiate. It does help. It does. It helps so much. Like, in my current role now, I was in that kind of bidding war. Honestly, I call it a bidding war between 2 good companies. So I would say that did help move things along faster. But I don't think that if I didn't have that other other offer, that I wouldn't have still been able to negotiate, right? Because again, it comes down to doing your research, market value, and all of that stuff, which I had done, and I had come ready with like, this is what I see people in the industry are making in this role, and this is why I'm asking for this amount. Yeah. Anything to add?
No, I'm agreeing with what you're saying. Like, especially if you're going to if you have offers from companies in the same industry or realm, if they hear that this person offered you this, a lot of times they're going to be like, okay, we know, the type of caliber person that you are because you got an offer from here, you got an offer from us, maybe you have an offer somewhere else. For them, it only helps. It doesn't, like, if you don't have another offer, it doesn't hurt, but it gives them like, okay, this person is like, we need to close this person, we need to get them in, let's sweeten the pot for them, right? So, exactly. So,
okay. Number 3, the offer is more than what I expected, so there is no need to negotiate.
Oh, yeah. That's an interesting one.
It is interesting. I don't think I've dealt with this before myself. Usually I have to fight for, no, let me not say fight for what I deserve. That's a lie. Because with this role, I think it was...
Yeah, it was pretty good.
It was more than what I expected, but I still... No, so yeah, I did deal with it. So...
What's your experience?
Mine?
Yeah.
Okay, so my personal experience with this was in my current role now, I was offered a salary that was more than I expected. And yeah, it was more than I expected. I don't even know how to say this without like saying too much. But yeah, so it was more than I expected. But to the point I made earlier, I was in this kind of bidding war. Honestly, I feel like that's what nudged me to ask for more. So, you know what I mean? Because the other company knew that I was also interviewing with this company, so they kind of bumped their numbers up to incentivize me. And then I took those numbers, not even with the purpose of like, okay, I want you to meet exactly this, but I was like, well, why not? Like, I'm getting offered this here, so maybe I could bring this to my current role, which I did. And then that's how the negotiations actually happened. So yeah, I'm gonna rewind because for myth number 2, where I was talking about like, I don't even remember how I phrased it, but basically, I think the only reason why I even ended up negotiating was because I had another offer, right? So that's a bad on my part. I mean, I was gonna be fine with it because it was more than what I asked for, but according to Harvard Business Review, this is Harvard.
It is Harvard.
This is Harvard, guys. But they have said, don't do this. So I will link the article below so you can read why, because I am, again, paraphrasing. But yeah, just don't do it. They said not to.
Sure.
All right, number 4. If your new boss says yes immediately, go celebrate. I did this earlier.
You did, and again, we're going to throw up that X one more time because that is not the way to go. Yeah. Again, we both talked about our experiences. Yep. I remember, again, to the day, I remember them giving me a number. I actually think I remember going like 2,000 to 3,000 more than what they gave. And they said, sure, cool. And
and then you're like, oh man, I should have asked for more.
I remember like celebrating. I was like going crazy. And then later on, when I found out, people were making more than me,
This was at the first role.
This is the same. This is at the first company I was at.
Yeah.
I started to realize, okay, maybe this wasn't such a great idea to do that, and like there were so many things prompting me to say like, yo, like this can't happen again. So
yeah, never.
That is a huge myth. Again, if they say yes immediately, I don't even know. Like, how do you avoid even getting into that situation? Like,
the way that you avoid getting into that situation is overshooting. So one of the myths that is on this list from Harvard Business Review, again, Harvard, but they say do not ask for what you want. No, the myth is ask for what you want, right? And they're saying no, you should ask for more than what you want. Because typically when you're negotiating, they're not going to meet what you want. They're going to come in a bit lower, right? So if you overshoot what you want a little bit, chances are you are going to land close to or on what you want. So honestly, I think that's how you avoid, because it is weird to say, okay, I want this. And then they come back and say, yeah, you're like, actually, I've thought about it again. And
I want more.
Then it's like seriously? Yeah. So literally the only way to avoid that, in my opinion, is again overshooting, not in a crazy way, right? Like still within bounds of your research.
Yeah, and I guess one other thing that I wanted to mention for the tips, even before you get an offer, a lot of recruiters do this, but if they don't, make sure to be transparent with it, or tell them what you're looking for, right? A lot of them do that and say, okay, what would your range be for this role and whatnot, whatever. That's the time to say it. So kind of going against that, if you ask, again, let's say you ask for $200,000, whatever signing bonus, blah, 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 and in your negotiations, they come back and say, okay, yes, that's perfect.
Negotiate more. Or no?
Well, I would say I would negotiate more because
I would be scared. I'm not gonna lie.
Yeah, but say you go through like a 2-month process for interviews. If in the beginning you wanted this, but then your expectations change, yes, okay. So I'm gonna take that back. Still negotiate, but again, it's good to give them a ballpark number up front so that they can kind of be thinking while you're going through your interviews and meeting all these people.
Yeah,
they can be thinking, okay, how do we get them, to this salary or whatever it is. But yeah, always negotiate.
I was gonna say something, but I can't remember. What did your sentence before? Always negotiate. Do you remember? It's all good. If it comes back, you'll see it in the comments.
Oh, you mean like saying the salary up front, or
it was something about that, but it's not coming back to me.
Okay.
So the last myth on my list, again, this is not all inclusive in the article, but this says being told no means negotiating was a mistake. That's what I was gonna say.
Okay.
Yeah, which is crazy. But yeah, so to Sam's point about like, if you gave a number in the beginning, you've gone through a 2-month process of like negotiating, they come back with the number you asked for, and then you say like, actually, I've been doing a bit more research, right? Or interviewing with other companies or whatever the case may be. And like, you're looking to see if it's possible to get around X amount. The worst they can say is no, right? So to the point earlier about them not rescinding their offer because of that, like they may be like, no, we can't do that, which is fine, but it's not like any shade to you at all. It's just like either yes or no. They can do it or they can't. And the reason why it's not a mistake is like negotiating is hard. Like it is something that is hard to do. So like the simple fact that you did it is a win, right? Because next time you'll do it again and you won't be scared of hearing no because you've already heard no before. So I feel like from my perspective, that's a good reason why like you shouldn't feel like you made a mistake if you hear no from negotiation. And
again, like I said, my second job when I went through the interview process and got my offer, I remember talking, I don't remember who I was talking to, but I was thinking, I want a little bit more money and then I'll be good. But
you were talking to me.
Was it you? But I think I was talking, I was talking to you, but I think I was talking to somebody else too. But I was saying like, okay, how do I, exactly tell them this because they're so excited. They're, giving me all these numbers and stuff.
So
and
excited for you to sign.
Yeah,
Well,
like a little bit more. So again, that situation was scary. We're not saying that it's not going to be scary.
It's terrifying.
where you go through it. But again, I said the number that I wanted. They said, we don't know if we're going to make it happen. 3 days went by, I think, and I'm like, oh man, maybe I shouldn't have asked for that. They came back and gave me the number. So again, you got to be firm. That's somebody, I was telling somebody that recently. You got to be firm. Like, it's all about you. These companies, let me not go on a rant, but like these companies will, if you lowball yourself, they go lowball you. They're going to give you. So like,
that's what you want.
Exactly. So it's important to know your worth and fight for yourself. Like, I saw a good TED Talk, and if I can find it, we'll put it in the link too. But it's about knowing your worth, knowing your value. Companies will never explicitly or outright pay you your value. You have to be the one to kind of take charge. And again, like she was saying this whole time, overshoot where you think you are for them to be able to say, okay, this is what we think is fair. So that's my piece. Be firm.
Yeah, be firm. That's it. We've gone through the myths. We've given tips. We've talked about our experiences. So if you have any questions or additional topics that you'd like for us to discuss, leave them in the comment section or send us a message. Episode 4 coming soon. So again, make sure you send in any topics soon if you want them to make it onto our next episode. So thank you so much for listening. Thank you for taking on our advice and our feedback.
Best of luck. We hope to, help at least one person with their salary negotiations and just feeling more confident in it. So we will see you guys in episode 4.
And please let us know if this is helpful. Thanks. Bye.